Hi, my name is Lauren, and this is my aging and disability assignment for my PMI class. So, we are going to talk a little bit about aging. Being a senior citizen is considered someone who is over the age of 65 years old, and someone who is disabled is someone who is not able to do something that what a normal person would be able to do, such as someone who is disabled is someone who could be in a wheelchair, someone who is paralyzed, they're a quadriplegic or a paraplegic. So it's very, interesting to see what happens as our body ages and the disabilities that our body can go through. Our body is a very expansive walking organ. There's so many things that can go wrong with our bodies to make us disabled. We could be in a car accident and, immediately be paralyzed from the waist down, meaning we can't feel anything from the waist down. Most of the time, someone who is a paraplegic or a quadriplegic, they sometimes lose all feeling, all motion. They can't move at all. They lose being able to use the bathroom on their own. A lot of times they'll be having a permanent catheter, or they'll have a colostomy bag or a urostomy bag. So those are very big things that will affect someone who has a disability. Having a disability is also someone who is considered to not be mentally stable, or someone who may have Down syndrome. Those are all considered disabilities. Now, how you live with your so-called disability is a completely different story. Everything affects each individual differently. Not one person is the same as another. Even if they both have, Down syndrome, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're the same person. They still are an individual and are still capable of doing a lot of things. I think we need to, as we advance health, we need to redefine the word disability and what it actually means. So the next question is how our understanding of aging and disability compares to someone of a different generation. So I believe that older generations consider, aging a lot differently than what we would consider now in 2018. Someone who is older, they watched people go through, the Depression era, World War II, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, the Gulf War. So there's lots of wars that have been happening. So I think the people who, are alive now and their views on aging is that they didn't get to see a lot of people age or age well like they are today. So I think that's a difference. A lot of people that are older, they view disability as someone who really couldn't work because they were physically disabled to not be able to go to work. I think as generations have advanced and we've aged as a country, as a community, is that things have become more advanced and we realize that there's a lot more disabilities rather than just physical disabilities. So that is a big change, I think, between the generations is, someone who grew up in, the 40s and the 50s, you went to work no matter what. You were considered disabled if you physically couldn't work or you mentally were handicapped, as they would call it back then. So that's, I think, a difference. Some other things, you have to consider is that every generation has grown up under different circumstances. Kids today are growing up with a lot more technology than what our senior citizens grew up with. So they have more advanced health care as well, so we're able to live longer. So it's kind of a nice thing. It's kind of a terrifying thing at the same time. If you talk to someone who is over 100 years old, they will tell you it's accomplishment. But at the same time, it's, you've seen so much. What more do you want to see at the same time? We recently had a couple here in Green Valley, Arizona. They were actually in our local paper, and they turned 100 together. They were a few days apart, and they celebrated, I think, 67 years of marriage. And I had a chance to actually talk with them about becoming living in an assisted living. And the gentleman stated to me, he's like, well, I'm not quite sure I'm ready yet. He's like, I'm still pretty well getting around, but it's a thought, I'm getting older. I always tell people you're not considered old until you're 100. And that's just a personal thing I have always grown up with. I have been a certified caregiver for over 10 years, and I work as a certified caregiver and a community liaison and an assisted and independent with memory care building in Green Valley. I have worked around the geriatric population for the majority of my life. My mom was an in-home caregiver, and so I grew up going to, these people's homes and sitting there and just talking with them, chatting with them, listening to their stories. And, I learned a lot. I also learned a lot about taking care of people. My grandmother died of diabetes at the age of 65. So when I was a small child, I learned you keep your loved ones home and you learn to care for them. So I learned to give insulin shots. I learned how to do the blood sugar monitoring. So even as a young child, all I knew was taking care of someone. That is my heart and that is my compassion. So doing this assignment for me, it felt very easy because I am so in love with working with the geriatric population. As my parents age, I can watch, for signs and symptoms of, things that I see every day in my job. As well as, I have my grandmother right now who is refusing to go into an assisted living, and it's difficult from my perspective because I sit and talk with people all day long who have never thought about putting their loved one in an assisted living, and they come to me and they're like, we're so broken down, we're so tired, it's so much work, we can't do it anymore, and they feel horrible for wanting to do it and place someone in a facility. And it's my job to tell them, it's okay, it's all right, we're here to help you, this is why we exist. Let me take this burden off of you so that way you can just love your family member, but you don't have to do the burden of taking care of them all the time. I think I would never want my parents to be placed in assisted living. However, if that's something that they need, then I would be 100% for it. My dad's a very social person, so I could see him enjoying it a lot. My mother is very antisocial, so I could see her not liking it because it's being around a lot of other people. So that would be kind of a hard thing to decide. I hope I don't have to do that anytime soon, but unfortunately my parents both turned 60 this year. So those are things that I think about all the time. So being around people who have aged, it has positively impacted my life. I watch people who come in and, they're fine, they're great, they come in as an independent resident, and, they're doing fine, and you watch them decline. I have a resident who just this past week, I had to make the phone call to his son and say, hey, your dad unfortunately is declining, and I'm going to have to move him from assisted living into memory care. And it was very hard because our facility is a very new facility. We've been open just a little over 2 years, and he was one of the first residents who came into the building, and we put him in. He was independent, and we watched the slow decline. And to see him now where he's in a wheelchair, he doesn't get up and walk, he's on oxygen 24/7. He doesn't really remember everything that you tell him anymore. He knows who I am, and he says good morning and everything, but just to watch that decline, and what's happening. People who come into assisted living sometimes, they know that at some point they're gonna die. They don't want their families to have to deal with that burden. So sometimes that's hard, but I love working with the seniors. I love being around the geriatric population. To me, they are very interesting people to work with. They always have good stories, or, they've traveled all over the world. I have another gentleman who I moved him into my facility on Monday night, 10 p.m. He came straight from the hospital. His son flew in on Sunday and realized his dad wasn't well and took him to the local hospital and found out that he is full of cancer tumors. So he essentially placed his dad, because he had no idea what to do with him. He has never cared for anyone. So he essentially placed his dad in my facility just to pass away. Which, he said it was hard. He didn't realize what was going on because they were, 2,000 miles away. A lot of times that happens, and you have to be able to stand in the gap and talk to people and be like, it's okay, let me help you. Being a certified caregiver and a community liaison, it's my job to obviously bring people into the community and be like, hey, sign up and spend, $6,000 a month on care. But at the same time, you have to have a heart and a compassion to work with seniors. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. It's not an easy job. Every person you admit into your facility will pass away at some point, and you have to be the one that helps them and guides them and helps the family through the process. And you become attached to these people. And it's hard, but it's the best job I think anybody could ask for. I've learned so much from it. So it's had a very positive impact on my life. I appreciate people a lot more. When people come into my door and they're like, oh my gosh, we don't know what to do. And I'm like, it's okay. I've been there, and here I am to help you guys through your journey. So I think it's a very big life lesson that you learn a lot about what's going on from other people. So I think it's nice. So a little bit of statistics about the senior population. A senior is anyone who's over the age of 65 years old. There is over 47 million seniors that are in the United States. The leading cause of senior injuries and death is actually falls. And most falls happen in the bathroom. It's the most dangerous place ever. And the other horrible thing that makes people fall is rugs. Horrible thing. I always tell people rugs are a silent killer. You don't realize how dangerous they are until they attack you. Retirees, so again, people who are over the age of 65 are also usually retired. There's about over 5,000 different communities that they can choose from, again, in the United States, with Florida being the most popular retirement area. Only 3% of senior citizens live in nursing homes, though. So that's, kind of nice. A lot of people are able to keep family members home a lot longer because of different age gaps. Different generations are able to do more jobs from home versus, before everybody had to go to work and you went and worked your 9-to-5 job. Nowadays, people can work from home. It's very easy, and they can stay at home and take care of an aging parent or an aging grandparent, which is very helpful. Most seniors have more than one chronic illness. A lot of illnesses that seniors have is arthritis, diabetes. Most of the time it's diabetes too. They have congestive heart failure, COPD. There's really a lot of them. Alzheimer's is another big one. Alzheimer's affects more people than what I think people realize. It is a disease where there is no cure, and it affects everybody differently. A lot of times families will just think, oh, mom and dad are getting older and they're getting forgetful, and they don't really realize that they have that disease, Alzheimer's or dementia. Alzheimer's and dementia over time will actually eat away the brain until the brain basically cannot function, which makes all the other organs shut down. People can have early onset of Alzheimer's as well. The youngest person to have the early onset of Alzheimer's is 35 years old, and they only live to be, I think it was 55 years old. So Alzheimer's is a disease that kills. Most people don't also realize that. It does mean that you're forgetful, but at some point you forget how to function. You forget how to breathe. You forget how to eat. You forget how to use the restroom. A lot of times it is very difficult to watch someone go down that process, where they go from knowing who you are to not knowing who you are. You're just a stranger. A lot of times there's a lot of fear involved with someone with Alzheimer's. So there's a lot of medications that are available if given correctly to help someone ease through this transition. Women do tend to outlive men, so there's a lot more women in memory cares or assisted livings or independent livings because women just tend to live longer. The average American life expectancy is 78 years old, which is better than it has been. It will increase over time as well, since generations are living longer and healthcare is improving. So based what I've learned on this course, I think as a society we are realizing that seniors are a lot more helpful, and I think that we can see that they're not really a burden. They're a very useful tool to our society. We can learn from what they've lived through, learn from their stories to help improve our future. We can take their advice and their knowledge and turn that into machines that we're able to make available now because they had an idea, but they didn't have the technology or the tools to make it happen. We realize that, once our older generations are gone, part of our history also goes away with them. Everybody has lived through something and they all explain it a little bit differently. And that provides us the actual real life history of our nation versus, what we read in the history books. That's only part of the information. It doesn't tell us every detail that goes on. I think just as a society, there's so much more beyond just having a senior citizen plop in a chair and be like, okay, well, you're old now, go away, we don't need you. I think we're realizing that they are very helpful. They're a very important part of our community and part of our nation. I hope that everyone realizes that senior citizens are wonderful people, and that they are great to work with. So this has been my assignment. Thank you so much.